Hi guys, this is Sahit and welcome to Conversation with Ceipal, a show where we show you today's most successful and innovative talent and HR practitioners regularly. Today we're joined by Matt Charney. Matt here is the Executive Editor at Recruiting Daily and Chief Content Officer and Allegis Global Solutions. If I had to kind of divulge deeper into that case study, so I have say two companies, both of which are the same. There's just a minor difference in both of them. However, one company has a spectacular video of it on YouTube, having all of their employees cheering and showing their company culture, and the other company doesn't have any. So, what difference do you think that video in particular makes for a company, or for in improving that EVP or brand value proposition? So, what role do you think it plays?
Yeah, so YouTube, if I look at like video content in general, YouTube in particular, that's the wrong place to use it or have expectations for it, right? So if you're already in the offer stage, Glassdoor and peer review sites become important, as do like LinkedIn, knowing other people in the company. There are some drivers, but for me, the best use of video is in a job description itself. That should be something that ideally a candidate would see before they applied, if only because, one, it helps a job posting stand out, which is just as hard as making two distinct companies, have any difference whatsoever. But most importantly, it'll help that job description get found, given the fact that video helps with SEO. So that, to me, is where you would put it, is in pre-contemplation, not after the fact.
Then in our initial conversation, my first email that I drafted to you, I kind of mentioned that reaching out to top talent is tough, and top talent reaching out is tough. So what do you think about that statement? What is your take on that statement?
So here's what I think is that we spend a lot of money on things like building an employer brand or populating career-related Twitter stream. Or going to career fairs, and all of these activities, to me, career fairs may be an overstatement, but those are all activities that don't add a lot of value and almost can't be measured, right? What's the value of a brand? Consumer marketers can't answer that. To me, what we really need to look at is, we know for the most part an applicant or candidate's information to the point where we know their proximate location, we know their current employer, we know where they're at level-wise, we generally know where they've been to college, things of that nature that are the exact same field captures that places like Google Ads or Facebook Ads or any retargeting network need to serve targeted ads. So for me, that's really what the focus should be, is on creating sort of as many brand impressions as possible during the process. And then when you do have a candidate who you have identified and connected with, and hopefully there are going to be less of those applicants and more qualified candidates, if you're able to move the dollars from building a generalized brand into hyper-targeted advertising, right? Costs about the same, effects are way better just in terms of cost per hire, cost per application, and CPA, right? So just taking all that into account, for me, what it comes down to is having a commonality with that person or something to talk about that's not work. Because as much as it's also been trendy to talk about, recruiters need to help build employees as brand ambassadors and subject matter experts and need to get out there and really tell the world what a great place it is to work. The truth of the world is employees are already talking about work. They just may not be mentioning you, as a brand. But at the same time, it really just kind of comes down to the job of a recruiter is to be a brand advocate and a subject matter expert in the one thing everyone at a company, CEO on down, cares about, which is career management. So all that is to say, I think it's incumbent on a recruiter to get out there and sound like a human and make human connections rather than sound like somebody who's from human resources looking for resources, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so today when I look at the market landscape, I think that great tourists and with markets. So I think that at some level what you said was absolutely right, because the recruiter should be our brand advocate, because he's the only person who's reaching out to applicants day in day out, talking about the company, talking about the job, talking about the profile. And I think he's one of the people with whom applicants would hear from directly, like about the company culture, about the job profile, and everything. So I think that you're spot on with that. Because circling back to data and analytics. So, when you think about analytics, be it in marketing, recruitment, or HR, I mean, I know it's important in marketing, probably HR too. However, what does it mean to you? So, what does it mean to you, and what does it mean in recruitment? So, why do you think that it's important?
Well, analytics are important in the sense that it's the same thing as forecasting in finance, right? Use historical data will generally math-wise predict future results, right? So I do think that's important. I think that for all the talk of big data and AI and machine learning that's going on right now, we don't really have a way to effectively measure the easiest of things to track, like source of hire, cost per hire, even in a lot of cases, at least anything that's really actionable or usable. So for me, I think that analytics are important, but it really comes down to being able to measure that elusive quality of hire statistic, and that's not a throughput statistic, which is to say, particularly on like the staffing side or high volume, it's measured on things like outgoing phone calls or candidates submitted. And ultimately, that those aren't accurate stats in any way, shape, or form. Volume doesn't equal quality. It does equal results, but only because if you cast a wide enough net, you're going to get the right fish. But then at the same time, what you have to be able to do is then be able to figure out not only is this person meeting the requisition requirements, but also how much of an impact are they making on a company. So I've only found one statistic in all of my years that I would say is accurate and true across companies as a quality of hire measure, which is revenue per employee. Because if you think about it, the less employees you have, the more money you make, the better you're doing, right? And then you can look at other statistics like a number of times that person's been promoted internally, their NPS score, the amount of bottom line contributions that they've made, if they're a profit center, but those become a little bit nebulous. So for me, what's really important is less to have a data set at this point in time that's actionable, because those don't really exist right now. And if they do, the systems that are necessary to tell any sort of story don't talk to each other. What's important is to determine a baseline, if you don't already have one, that you and the business can agree on as being, what you're going to judge yourself on, and making sure that the numbers go up. And then from there, you can start fiddling with the different factors that go into that, to determine where the correlation is and where the causation is. But, as far as getting too clever with math, I think we can fall into that trap, but at the end of the day, we need to know where we started before we know where we're going. And I think that's where a lot of people are lacking. So it's tremendously important. I think it will continue to be more so, particularly if the economy goes the other direction and you have to go to a CFO and justify all the money you've spent and why they should retain you as a cost center. Then, that's an answer you should know. So I would say the most important data is business related, not recruiting related. And if you know how to read a P&L, you're actually probably going to be okay, if only because you are in charge of the largest expense on any line item budget, which is salary and compensation. And being able to keep that number fixed or at where projections and finance need to go, that's really all you can hope to do, in my mind.
So, I mean, absolutely. So, of course, as you mentioned, the business data. And so when it comes to data, I think one of the challenges that we hear out there a lot is that there's a system, there's a tool, but the data is a mess. And as you mentioned, picking the right set of data is really important and crucial to kind of differentiate from failure and success. So when it comes to data, do you have any advice to talent acquisition specialists, as to what people should be doing from data from there? So say, they have pattern, or so what data should a talent acquisition specialist be collecting and what he should be doing with that data?
So for me, the idea that all of this data, it is the average Fortune 500 recruiting department uses 22 different technology solutions, right, in order to do the recruiting process, from point solutions to the ATS and so on. What's funny is that the ones that own the market, namely Oracle, SAP, and Workday, are actually also accounting systems and procurement systems, meaning that ostensibly the data that's you should be using is actually kind of already there in a lot of cases. So for me, what it really comes down to is being able to, this is where storytelling becomes important. You need to be able to tell a story with numbers. So using the data from other departments. So procurement, particularly indirect services procurement, generally tends to be in charge of contingency staffing and anyone who's not full-time, right? So that's handled not through an HR function often, but it's handled through procurement. So for me, how much is procurement spending per hour per employee? How long does it take for them to fill project or temp-based roles? That's a good benchmark, right? That's generally sitting in that same tier 1 system. How much is marketing spending to acquire a lead, and what's the average total lifetime value of the customer? That's important data to know, because I want to know how much it costs to acquire a candidate, whether that's a reasonable amount, and do those sources and costs look at all or tie into my consumer spend, because they should, absolutely. And so I just think that when you look at all of the data that we should have, it's all there, and we may not have it, but ultimately we talk a lot about recruiting as like an opportunity, right? Like, oh, I have this exciting opportunity for you. And we have to understand that there is no way to measure opportunity cost. So if we're selling an opportunity, then there's absolutely no way to measure it, but you learned your first day in business.
Yes. If you had to give an advice to talent acquisition specialists, to recruiters about marketing, what would it be?
Do not spend money on marketing, because you're not in marketing.
Okay.
So 2 things I would say. A job description is the only bit of recruitment marketing in my mind that really matters. Those are roles that need to be filled. Those are what you're spending advertising dollars behind, and that's what the first thing a candidate generally sees. So spend your time focusing on making those better and more enticing, and you're going to be okay, because that is your first point of competitive differentiation. And the second is take all that money that you're spending on employer branding and social recruiting, all of which is 2 to 3% of hires, and start putting that money towards what we call programmatic advertising, which is essentially being able to serve ads to a targeted population, e.g. candidates who meet your profile, who you only pay for when they come onto your website and apply, right? As opposed to either spending money on a job board slot or spending an agency to build a microsite that's got a EVP and all these videos. Just focus on advertising and making sure that you're able to create as many impressions as possible, and focus on job descriptions, because that's the piece of collateral that everyone reads. Because if you look at a career site, guess what people do when they go on there? They don't go to the culture part. They go to the find jobs, and then they apply.
Yep, absolutely. So into the future, we're looking at the future. So what do you think should be the future for recruitment and marketing? So when it comes to that, do you think a recruitment team should be accompanied by a marketing team, or what is your prediction for the future? And if yes, do you think that recruitment and marketing should kind of work together? Both the recruitment team and the marketing team should be working together to create a fantastic culture and, that vibe of the company, to get out there to improve the candidate experience and a lot of other stuff, and to improve the job description or anything as such.
Yes and no. So that's a relatively complicated question. So I think that recruiters should focus on filling jobs, and should marketing should work on providing them with the background data on consumer preferences, habits, and also sources that are working together. So I think from an analytics perspective, absolutely. What happens if marketers start working in recruiting and paying a lot of attention? This is true now and will be true even more so in the future as you start having Salesforce becoming much more active in HR, HubSpot's now released applicant tracking system capabilities, is you have systems that are far and away better at engaging and tracking applicants than applicant tracking systems themselves already sitting within marketing. So ultimately, if recruiting and marketing converge too much, not only is marketing going to win, but the value of a recruiter, which is again on those personalized interactions, going to disappear. So for me, find the data from them, but ultimately just worry about making hires as efficiently and as effectively as possible, and the rest is pretty easy.
Thank you very much, Matt. You've been a phenomenal guest. We really appreciate the insights you provided us. However, before we part ways, just one piece of advice or guidance for our listeners, if you'd want to impart it. And if our audience has any questions, would you be okay to be reached out to?
Yeah, sure. Easiest way to find me is matt@recruitingdaily.com. Pretty easy. Or at Matt Charney on Twitter. Generally more responsive to Twitter than that. And if you message me on LinkedIn, much like a candidate, I probably won't answer. But all that is to say, the one last bit of advice that I can tell you is that is HR technology, as much as we like to focus on it, is not going to exist as an independent category for much longer. And so if you want to know where this industry is headed, you need to look at consumer technologies first and understand that all technology has the potential to be HR technology. So if you're going to pay attention to what you can fix from that perspective, look at the broader market. But if you really want to know what's fixable today and with no money, it just comes down to how many people are you willing to engage with, how much to get yourself out there, and how much can you as a recruiter build your own brand that people come to, as opposed to relying on the company or employer you're working for.
Okay, so thanks so much for that, Matt. It was really great speaking with you. Thanks for being a phenomenal host and for helping us kickstart our first ever podcast. And for our listeners, stay tuned to our channel Ceipal Corp for latest updates about us and for more conversations with Ceipal. Until then, signing off. Bye-bye.